This week, social media is abuzz with news about Britney Spears, who regained her independence and literally her freedom when the courts ended her conservatorship. In thanking the many fans and the people who spoke out for her when she could not, Spears said, "Honestly, my voice was muted and threatened for so long, and I wasn't able to speak up or say anything. I honestly think you guys saved my life." Muted, threatened, unable to speak up. That summarizes her journey in a sentence. Having her voice restored was life-saving for her. I bring up Britney Spears because there's an ancient parallel to her experience that happens in our portion in Jacob's family. Dina is the child of Leah and Jacob, one of 13 children and their only girl. You're familiar with the other children in the family who will become the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel. As Dina's family plans to return to her father's ancestral home, Jacob prepares for his encounter with his twin Esau, from whom he fled in fear after taking both Esau's birthright and their father's blessing that was meant for the firstborn. Even after so many decades apart, Jacob doesn't know whether to expect Esau to welcome him or to be met with a simmering grudge, perhaps edging on violent recompense. So, Jacob used his family as a physical buffer. They walked ahead of him with gifts meant to appease an ancient grievance, hoping to placate Esau. But Jacob stayed behind, and we hear his internal distress from the words he offered to God. "Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau." The text describes what happened next. That same night, Jacob arose, and taking his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, and his 11 children, he crossed the ford of the Jabbok River. And this is where we see an echo of Britney Spears' experience. Rashi asks, so we don't have to, about the reference to Jacob's 11 children. Benjamin had not yet been born, so they numbered 12. So where was Dina, Rashi wants to know? The Midrash Answers. Jacob placed her in a chest and locked her in, so that Esau would not see her and so desire her and want to marry her. Isn't that a little extreme? Locked in a box. Or might we call it an ancient form of conservatorship? As readers, we wonder if Dina's confinement is meant to protect her, to hide her from potential harm. And we also wonder, was there no other way to keep Dina safe? With Dina hidden away, what did this do for Jacob at a time when he felt vulnerable to his brother's wrath? Perhaps humbling Dina was less about her protection and more about her father's sense of control and authority. After all, Esau's brutish reputation still made Jacob fearful. He knew that the brother he had left behind was coarse, one who sought immediate gratification for his urges and appetites. And then again, showing consideration for Dina's welfare was entirely appropriate, but the method was abhorrent. Rashi didn't think to ask, how did Dina feel? Although Tyler did ask that question. How was she able to emerge from this traumatic experience and carry on? The text is silent, focusing on the reunion of the men rather than how Dina endured that humbling experience of being forced to hide, which obscured her presence entirely. And so we return, muted, unable to speak up, silent, as if Dina was not there at all. Rabbi Micah Streifer and Rabbi Judith Schindler noted that only by listening to women of the past can we truly listen to the women of the present. Throughout her life, Dina's story is one of silence and being silenced. Recounted in only a few words, it displays a world shattered by her abuse, her father's silence in the face of her assault, and the revenge that her brothers waged. What should be expected of a parent when he learns that his daughter has been assaulted? The same parent who hid Dina away ostensibly for her own protection had literally nothing to say in the face of her pain. Only after her brothers, Shimon and Levi, had taken revenge on the rapist and his entire village, did Jacob break his silence, and then only to admonish his sons, noting that their actions could jeopardize the whole family should the neighboring communities band together against them. Jacob was worried about his future hypothetical lineage, while his daughter suffered in real time, right before his eyes. For Jacob, Dina's circumstances were a problem, an impediment to peace with his neighbors, and that threatened his peace of mind. And still, when Dina's father failed to protect her this time, Jacob chose to look away. Remember that earlier in his life, he had had a dream of a ladder reaching to the heavens, with angels ascending and descending. And when he woke, he reflected in amazement, noting that God was in that place, and he simply didn't know it. He was unaware. Well, his awareness had grown thereafter, but was still limited, extending to his safety, making him hide his daughter from Esau's gaze and keep her from his reach. Yet when Dina had been assaulted, Jacob chose not to see it, unaware. He was worried about bigger things, about himself, about peace with his brother. And though this is an ancient story, it could have been taken from the headlines of any newspaper in any town or city. So let's step back from the biblical story to ask, do we really believe that Britney Spears, locked away from the public, was silent all these years? Nevertheless, we couldn't hear her. It wasn't that she was silent, but silenced. And in the same spirit, why should we think that Dina had no response to Shechem's abuse, or to her father's indifference, or her brother's overly assertive retribution? Could she really have been silent, or was she silenced because there was no one to hear her? To listen would have disrupted carefully constructed societal boundaries. To hear her would have threatened Jacob's own sense of power and place in the world, and that was not an option. And because Dina's voice was never heard, her silence tends to remove her from our gaze too, as if she is unimportant. But Dina exists. She exists in our text, and there are countless people just like Dina, just like Brittany, who exist in our society. Today, when we use our voice to highlight Dina's experience, our actions restore her humanity. We can tell the story that she could not by acknowledging her pain, her violation. We unlock the box for others who suffer, renewing their sense of agency and clearing a path which leads from silence to presence in the community. All around us are women and men who are just beginning to break their silence, refusing to remain boxed in by convention, power differentials, and yes, by abuse. Having a voice, having agency over oneself is what so many seek after having been limited by others. As people are finding their voices, we need to make space to listen. And I recognize that this small step does not get us all the way there, wherever that mythic destination may be. But it invites us to help change the dynamic in which we live. In the last year and a half, every segment of society has had important discussions about what it takes for systems to change. And one of the most shocking realizations is that we, you and I, are part of systems that help to keep those very boundaries in place. From racial inequities to sexual harassment, as long as we do nothing and say nothing. Rabbi Sachs taught in the name of Isaac Arama. Any crime known about and allowed to continue ceases to be an offense of individuals only and becomes a sin of the community as a whole. Just as we are responsible for the perpetuation of inequities, we can also help to change them. And while we make space for others, let us make changes in our own circles, speaking up about what is and what is not acceptable. So may our actions help bring us one step closer to the freedom, the power, the agency that Britney Spears felt when she regained her voice, and so may it be for all. Shabbat Shalom.